Welcome to Early Returns, hosted by Jan Baran, a partner of Holtzman Vogel. This podcast examines law and politics and seeks insights from political players in elections, lobbying, media, and the law. Now, let's join our host, Jan Baran.
Welcome back to Early Returns, a podcast about law and politics. I'm your host, Jan Baran. Our producer is Jody Mayer-Piazza. After taking a sabbatical to get my shoulder joint replaced, I am delighted to start a new season of Early Returns. While recovering from my surgery, I tried to sort out exactly what happened in the recent November elections. And future episodes of Early Returns will explore the law and politics of the 24 elections and the incoming administration. But for today, I'm starting to look forward to the next election in November of 2025. For those of you who might be surprised, you heard me correctly. Virginia, like New Jersey, has its statewide legislative elections the year after the presidential election. And in Virginia, the three statewide elected offices are governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. In 2021, the Republicans were elected to all three positions for the first time in years. The incumbent governor, Glenn Youngkin, cannot run for re-election under the state constitution, but the lieutenant governor, Winsome Earls-Sears, has already announced her candidacy for governor. The remaining incumbent officer is the attorney general, James Miyares, who is my guest today. James Miyares is the son of an immigrant who fled Fidel Castro's Cuba. He attended public schools in Virginia Beach and received a college degree from James Madison University and his law degree from the College of William and Mary. Before becoming Attorney General, Mr. Miyares was an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Virginia Beach, and then he served in the Virginia House of Delegates for 3 terms. He has announced his campaign for re-election and has agreed to talk with us about the role of Attorney General in the Commonwealth and the issues facing Virginia. James Miyares, thank you very much for being with us here today.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I've given the audience your formal professional background, but I think everyone would like to know a little more about you personally. For my sake, I'd like to know how you wound up in Virginia, first of all. And secondly, I'm interested in how it is you decided to become a lawyer and then a politician. What is that?
Well, like a lot of Virginians, I got brought here as a kid. My family moved to Virginia in the 1980s to the Virginia Beach, coastal Virginia area. That's how I ended up in Virginia as a child and went to both elementary, middle, and high school in Virginia, obviously college and legal career as well. Lived in Virginia since I was 11. I would say being a lawyer really is my family story. As I like to kind of joke around when I travel around Virginia, sometimes I'll get asked, what kind of name is me-YAR-ez? And I like to say, well, it's Southern. It's deep South. But you have a great perspective of what this country is and what the rule of law is once your family has come from a country that does not have the rule of law. And I remember as an early child hearing the stories from my uncle, Angel Miyares, about when he was in Cuba. He had gotten put on Castro's radar because he had handed out leaflets, anti-Castro leaflets, asking for a democracy in Cuba. And also he had refused to join a communist militia. And so as a result, he got put on the radar. Well, when the Bay of Pigs invasion happened, they arrested anybody that could rise up. They showed up at his home. My mother was still a teenager at the time, arrested him in the middle of the night with no concept of reading someone their Miranda rights. There's no bond hearing. He was just arrested with a gun to his head, taken to an empty baseball stadium where he suffered the humiliation of a mock execution. And I remember as a child asking him, how in the world could they have done that? It was just inconceivable to me in some ways as a young child. And he says, you don't understand because you were born and raised in this country and we have the Bill of Rights, we have rights here. And that really was my first interest in what we have, which is, I think, very precious. I call it the American miracle. The system that we have set up in this country has given more opportunity and second chances to more people than any country that has ever existed in the history of the world. And it gave the me-YAR-ez family that chance after seeing the horrors of communism. That's what got me interested in the law. And then obviously when you're in middle school and high school and you have an interest of history as I do, at least for law school, William and Mary was always a school that fascinated me given its connection to both our founders, to That's where Thomas Jefferson got his degree, and very fascinated by that. So that's how I ended up on the path to being a lawyer. Long story short.
Well, you did that, and then you got involved in politics. I mean, you started by running for the House of Delegates here in Virginia. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, that's, I had the opportunity to run before. I had a young family and I'd said no. And in 2015, kind of somewhat unexpectedly, there was a retirement and a seat became open, and several people had approached me about running, and I had said no before and prayed about it and felt like I was being called to do it that time. And, and then I loved serving in the House of Delegates. I represented the oceanfront of Virginia Beach for about 6 years of the ocean. In the General Assembly, I loved the fact that it was a part-time legislature. We met 60 days a year in Richmond, and then we go home. And I thought that was good. Being a citizen legislature, I think, was important because you are back and immersed in your community. You're not far away in some capital somewhere. You're dealing with the same traffic, and your kids are, at the local schools. And I love serving in the House of Delegates, and then obviously decided to run for a different office, going from the legislative branch to the executive side of the equation. But it's been quite a joy.
Well, let's follow up on that. You are the Attorney General now, and you have been for the last 3 years. I'd like to explore a little bit about what's involved in that job, and perhaps tying it into your experience in the legislature. What's the relationship of the Attorney General to the state legislature? Are they your clients at any time? Or?
Yeah, well, listen, as I always tell them, when they're sued in their official capacity, my office will handle it for them and represent them. And you'd never see that get leaked. I don't care whether our office is representing a Republican or a Democrat member. We're very, very professional. That is one of my biggest personal gripes with what I've seen out of the Merrick Garland Justice Department, is I think there is too many leaks that happen where they try to try things in the press. I think that's grossly unfair. So yes, I do represent them. I represent every state agency. I have over 21 different sections of the law that report to me. And so it's everything from prosecutors in the major crime division to criminal appeals to representing agencies. Obviously, my solicitor shop, being involved, arguing in federal court and appellate court. So you wear a lot of hats. All the university councils at every state university work for the Attorney General's office. So I say the Attorney General's office is this amazing intersection of law and policy. But the one thing that I do emphasize is when I was in the House of Delegates, I represented 80,000 people. And James Madison wrote that an elected representative in a legislative body, what they owe their constituents is their judgment, right? We're not a direct democracy. We're actually a republic. We are electing people to display judgment because particularly in the General Assembly, you're dealing with 3,000 bills in about a 60-day period. But once I then took the hat off as a legislator and I took the hat on as the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth, what I tell people is my job is not to supersede the judgment of a 140-member legislative body and the governor. The only way I will not defend the law is if I feel like it violates either the U.S. Constitution or the Virginia Constitution, or there's a conflict or some other kind of unique provision where I'm simply not able to do it.
Have you experienced such a conflict in your
Well,
career?
I mean, I will tell you this. There's laws that I defend in court to this day that when I was in the legislature, I voted against them. I didn't support them. But just because I thought it was a bad policy decision didn't mean that it violated any of the constitutional requirements. So that happens in my office. So
I think your predecessor declined to represent.
He did at times, and that was something that I did provide some public criticism because of that. But that's just, I realize I'm in a different role now. That's an elected body that has made a decision, and even laws they passed recently, maybe I wasn't in the legislative body, but I would have voted against it if I was there. That's just the role of Attorney General that you have to carry. And I have colleagues around the country, and it is fascinating getting to know my friends and my fellow AGs around the country, things that every office is different. Some offices have no prosecutorial authority whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Some have immense prosecutorial authority. Some offices don't have any attorneys that work for them that advise state agencies, that they're completely separate. So everyone's different. I think our office is pretty expansive. I would say that almost every aspect of state government we touch on. And so it makes every day very, very different. You can imagine meeting with attorneys from the major crimes division is going to be different than meeting with attorneys say in the child support division or the civil rights division. It's just going to be different what you're dealing with. And I think that's what makes the job also a lot of fun.
Well, here in the Commonwealth, we have what are called Commonwealth's attorneys, right?
Right.
In various local jurisdictions. And usually they're the ones who are prosecuting cases of certain violations. But you also have prosecutorial power. What's the difference between the cases that your office handles and the ones that the Commonwealth's attorneys handle?
Well, I'll give you an example. We have about a dozen areas of the law, about a dozen sections that we have either concurrent or sole jurisdiction to prosecute. So, for example, election fraud, that's something we have the jurisdiction to prosecute. Child pornography is something we have a jurisdiction to prosecute. And so usually what happens is you will see that we both have areas that we absolutely can go in regardless of what the local Commonwealth attorneys thinks. And we've actually thought and asked for and needed, I think, in my personal opinion, more expansive prosecutorial authority because, for example, on our child pornography cases, we've had several times where our prosecutors and our investigators are saying once it goes from viewing to be hands-on, where they've actually abused a child, we'd like to be able to continue to keep the case. Just a continuity issue trying to transfer it over and be able to expand it, particularly for child sex abuse cases. We haven't had the General Assembly sign off on it, but I think it's something that naturally makes a lot of sense for us. But also, particularly when there's a conflict from a local CA or if it's a local Commonwealth Attorney's office that is small and resource challenged. So we have an assistant AG that has come up alongside cop killer case down in Southwest Virginia that we are helping and assisting on actively. And so we do see that in the localities. They make a request for us for their assistance. And sometimes there's a conflict. We've had cases where there's initially a conflict and we handle a case. We're in the beginning stages and then they say there's no longer a conflict. Things have changed and they get the case back. So we work closely with our Commonwealth attorneys. Now, candidly, some of them we have a really deep philosophical disagreement with. I don't support prosecutors that generally view themselves as social workers instead of prosecutors, that their job is to seek justice and also be a voice for victims. And so we do have a philosophical disagreement with some of them. It's different than other states. In Florida, for example, the governor has the authority to remove from office the local district attorney that, in his opinion, is not following the law. That's not the case. In Virginia, the governor doesn't have the ability to remove a Commonwealth attorney that's not, in his mind, following the law. They're constitutional officers duly elected. So we do work very closely with our CAs. They're great partners, but we also work closely with the U.S. attorneys. We have, as part of our ceasefire program that we launched targeting violence in 13 specific localities, we took assistant attorney generals and then embedded them in the U.S. attorney's offices to bring gun crimes, particularly those that are using guns in the commission of a felony, in federal court to make sure they get mandatory minimums and other penalties. So we work really closely with both our federal prosecutors and with our local prosecutors, including our own individual prosecutions out of our office. The criminal section, believe it or not, is the largest section in the Attorney General's office.
How large is your office? How large is your staff?
It's always a moving target, roughly 700. Our main office is in Capitol Square with offices in Fairfax, Roanoke, Abingdon, and Hampton Roads. So the big state. I'm on the road a lot, but extraordinary men and women work in the Attorney General's office, and I'm incredibly proud to help lead them.
Well, you mentioned working with federal prosecutors. One of the hot topics in the country, as well as the Commonwealth of Virginia, is immigration. Of course, we're getting a new administration coming in that's made a lot of promises about fixing the immigration system and deporting illegal immigrants. What is the role of the Attorney General in any of those issues? What's your view on that issue?
Well, let me tell you, first of all, my view is this is one of the great national security challenges of our times and one of our great public policy challenges of our time. Since the Biden administration took office, you've had over 8 million illegal crossings into the United States of America. That is larger than the population of 32 U.S. states. It is the largest human migration into the United States of America in 248 years of our founding. We have never seen anything like it. What is happening in our border is absolutely heartbreaking. What the cartels have done, taking advantage of this right now. The world's largest criminal enterprise is narcotics trafficking. The second largest criminal enterprise is human trafficking. You're seeing words enter into the law enforcement lexicon that didn't exist just a couple of years ago. grape trees. I'm not going to get into the horrors of that, but the exploitation that is happening. Why? Because we have created an incentive for them to cross the border. 83% of those that are actually stopped at the border are given a piece of paper that says, we will see you at your asylum hearing in 5 years. It is the definition of a catch and release program. They have stopped doing DNA testing. I was briefed. I went down to the border. They have stopped doing DNA testing of the migrant children because they were seeing such a large percentage of the migrant people that were claiming they were family members weren't family members. And I was briefed how the cartels are now kidnapping children in certain provinces in northern Mexico to pair them with other migrants because of our policy of what we've seen with the non-separation. So we've seen a criminal enterprise. I think the Sinaloa cartels are the single most dangerous criminal enterprise on the planet. They make the Italian mafia look like the Boy Scout. And they are now exploiting human beings, and there are enough fentanyl is crossing our southern border to kill every single American in this country easily 3 to 4 times over. So we're seeing a humanitarian crisis. We have created this incentive, and then we've created a catch and release program. So what that has happened is we are seeing that every state is becoming a border state. And then you layer on top of that what I've seen in Virginia, which is our biggest challenge in Virginia is that our local authorities will not cooperate with federal authorities. I'll give you just one example. Obviously, we heard the horrific story out of Herndon. It was the first stranger rape in 12 years. Innocent women walking along the George Washington or Old Dominion Trail was raped by a Honduran national, was here illegally. 29 prior interactions with law enforcement. 29. Federal authorities weren't notified. Felony charges, including assault and battery in law enforcement office, was reduced to a misdemeanor by local Commonwealth attorneys. And then when your local sheriff will not cooperate, these individuals get a chance to just walk out free. I did a ride-along. I'm a big believer. Get out of your office and go out and talk to those who are on the ground seeing and what they're seeing. I just did a half-a-day ride-along with Fugitive Task Force in Northern Virginia, federal agents with ICE. All 3 of these individuals had previously been picked up on state charges in America. Weapons charge, drug dealing charges. The third was a known affiliated MS-13 gang member, here illegally, indicted on a rape charge, given bond by a judge, whole separate discussion. The proper course of acts is if the local sheriff had notified ICE, ICE would have gone to the jail and picked him up. He was allowed to walk right out of that jail cell, out into the public. A dozen agents had to track him down, surveillance him, find a time that they could actually arrest him where it would not harm the public. And he was delayed leaving his apartment very early in the morning. And by the time they were able to get him, he saw the agents, school bus runs in the corner. He starts running off. Kids are right there waiting to get on the bus. An individual that it took him 72 hours to track him down. He was a fugitive. The amount of man hours and time spent to get somebody that all it would have taken would have been if the sheriff had made a call to ICE. This was an individual with an extensive criminal history, was indicted on a rape charge, was here illegally. It's why people are getting frustrated by these ideas. And that's where the whole term sanctuary city comes from, this idea that local authorities aren't going to notify our federal partners. Well, public safety works when state, local, and federal are all working together. And they're adamantly against that. So listen, I'm a big believer in legal immigration. We allow 1 million legal immigrants a year. Actually, no other country on the planet allows that level of legal immigration. We're either a country that has borders or you're not. And it's a national sovereignty issue. You can't just suddenly open the floodgates. When my mother came here on a green card, she had to attest that she was going to work. She was not going to be dependent upon the state. There's a whole system of questions that they had to answer before she was able to come here. She fled Cuba, went to Spain, and then came to the United States of America. So I know this is a remarkable country, and Americans are a good and decent and generous people. But the one thing the American people don't like is they do not like to feel like they're being taken advantage of. And people that are violating our immigration laws, deciding to cut in line, not going through the health check. My mother had to do a full health check, whether she had tuberculosis and a host of other diseases. When you decide that you could just cut in line, it is why when you see Latino Americans have some of the highest, when you ask them whether about the idea of deporting people that have come here and crossed illegal, incredibly high percentage of them do, because they know what they went through and they know how they play by the rules. And so I think overall you need cooperation. Now, actual deportation, that's not something my office does because that's a federal function. United States, US v. Texas, basically states aren't allowed to do their own immigration laws. But we can encourage localities absolutely to work with our federal partners, and that's what keeps us safe.
What can be done to encourage localities to be more cooperative other than voting certain people out?
The governor is going to try to use the budget. The governor is trying to use incentives in the budget to say that if you're going to get money from the state of Virginia for your sheriff's office, to do so, you have to adopt a policy where you cooperate with ICE. And to be clear, the people that ICE are trying to get are those that are here illegally that have then committed substantive crimes, right? These overwhelmingly, when we talk about sheriffs that aren't cooperating, they're being picked up on other crimes, weapons charges, drug dealing charges, rape charges. That's what we're talking about. Those are the individuals they're targeting. And so most people, when they hear this, think to not do that is not common sense at all. Of course, it makes sense. Somebody's come here illegally and then they decided to commit violent crime or criminal acts. You should be notifying ICE. Well, that's not what's happening. And so, but I like to say common sense is very common these days. So we'll see what happens.
Well, let's go on to another issue and another client. You mentioned the legislature can be your client and other agencies. The governor can also be your client when the governor is sued, which happened in the recent election period when the Department of Justice sued the Commonwealth and Governor Youngkin for basically updating their voter rolls to eliminate any individual who would register to vote who said that he or she was not a citizen, as I recall. That was a lawsuit that was very unusual because of the timing and also that the federal government brought it, but also because this was a process that had been undertaken by other governors before Governor Youngkin for years, as I understand it. What do you think was going on there? Obviously, you were successful in representing the governor and the Commonwealth in getting a stay to prevent that particular lawsuit, and maybe still pending for what I know. What was that all about? And what does it mean?
Well, it was an interesting moment. It's definitely a little intimidating when the Department of Justice decides to come after you. But yeah, there was a law that dates back to, I think it was 2006 or 7, signed by a Democratic governor, Tim Kaine, that said to remove non-citizens off our voter rolls. And these are individuals that are not citizens that you are allowed to get. Listen, if you're a valid green card holder, you've always been able to get driving privileges in the country. There's paperwork you have to fill out. Now, the previous governor, before Governor Youngkin, did expand it that you don't have to show your immigration status. You could be here illegally and get some level of driving privileges as well. These are individuals that have confirmed they're not citizens of the United States, but then later up, they end up on our voter rolls. Could be they checked the box to be on our voter rolls or somebody registered them. And so the process was then somebody voluntarily checked the box. They were not a citizen. DMV would then send them a letter saying, by the way, you're currently on our voter rolls, but you indicated you're not a citizen. Please let us know. You have a window of time to let us know, or we're going to have to obey the law and take you off our voter rolls. So these are self-identified non-citizens. And somehow that was considered controversial by DOJ, and they sued us to enjoin us from stopping. We were grateful to take it to the Supreme Court and win. For them to lift the injunction, we lost the lower court to allow us to continue to do this. We are going to have an argument on the merits next year, but we're grateful that they cited from our legal theory that they're asking us to basically ignore our own law and that there's no violation of any civil rights law to remove self-identified non-citizens off our voter rolls.
So that case is ongoing and the merits will be decided next year. Is it back to the district court or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would not be surprised if it ends up back at the Supreme Court when it's all said and done.
Very interesting. Well, in your 3 years as Attorney General, has there been anything about the job that has surprised you?
Surprised me.
Other than this DOJ lawsuit? That was a surprise, I know. But
you're in a different role, for sure. I remember a dear friend from my college days called me right before I got sworn in, and he said, you'll be taking on a new role and you'll get a different level of criticism. And my only advice for you that I want to pass on is, never let praise go to your head or criticism go to your heart. I thought it was an amazing piece of advice. Never let praise go to your head or criticism go to your heart. I think that could apply to any profession. And sure as they can apply to lawyers. So I wrote that down and keep it next to my desk in Richmond. They both keep me mindful. Listen, the people that work here are extraordinary. I have found working with them to be even probably just a surprise of how much I've enjoyed working with the attorneys in this office, particularly some of the senior attorneys that came in with me, they took enormous pay cuts to come work in this office. Some of them making 1/6, 1/7 what they were making in the private sector. I'm always honored by that and that surprised by that. I don't know if their spouses like me very much for taking that level of a pay cut, but these are individuals that really wanted to get back and do something in Virginia. And so I'm a big believer that I never think I'm the smartest person in any room I walk into. I'm smart enough to know when I hear good ideas. And surround yourself with people that are in their respective field is a better lawyer than you, smarter than you on your team because it makes your job easier. And if I'm at A and I want to get to C, I'm not going to micromanage the B unless I don't have confidence in the team ability to do it. What I found time and time again is these are individuals that are very, very sharp. I don't need to micromanage. Every single deputy, I have 4 of them plus my solicitor. They're each running their own law firm, whether it's in the criminal division, the civil division, the health and education division. Each one, no matter which division you're in, you're running your own law firm. And they're just fantastic to work with. So they've delivered a lot of wins for me. I'm immensely proud of them. And so surround yourself with great people. And I've never been stressed on this job because I have just an amazing team. And when you have an amazing team, the stress level goes down. And if you're not able to do it, you realize it's not because you don't have the talent to do it, that your team just, for whatever reason, the law or the facts or something wasn't there. And that's okay. That's okay. And it's a good feeling to have.
Well, you've got a record to run on. You've announced you're going to run for reelection. The election is only going to be 11 months away from now. What is going to be your campaign? What are the issues that you're going to be talking about to the Virginia voters to justify their continuing confidence in you?
Well, what I tell everybody that works for me, no matter what division, whether you're a prosecutor, whether you're in the civil rights division, the environmental law division, the consumer protection division, that at the end of the day in the Attorney General's office, we're the people's protector. That's what we do. We protect you from bad corporate actors. We protect you from major crime. We protect your civil rights. We protect you, if need be, from federal overreach. And so my message is going to be rehire me to continue to protect you and your family. And I think there are promises made and promises kept. I said I was going to run a victim first mindset in the Attorney General's office, be a voice for victims and also go after violent criminals. We've done that with Operation Ceasefire with our targeted prosecution. When I took office, the murder rate was at a 20-year high. The violent crime rate was at a 20-year high. Now they've been dropped by 30%. Why? We went after repeat violent offenders, that small subset of violent criminals that are committing over 50% of the violent crime. You have to go after these repeat offenders. We went after them in federal court if need be to get them off our streets and out of our communities. And you're seeing the murder rate and the violent crime rate in Virginia drop as a result. When I took office, our addiction rate was at an all-time high in Virginia. More people were dying, more young people were dying from drug overdoses than they were from car fatalities, something we hadn't seen in decades. 108,000 people died nationally my first year in office from addiction overdose. We lost 55,000 Americans in the Vietnam War over 15 years. So it was 2 Vietnam Wars happening every 12 months. We decided to both tackle addiction, both through One Pill Can Kill and our public service announcement. 80% of these counterfeit pills on the street have fentanyl in it, but also to go after these dealers and also get people treatment. One of the things that we're most proud of in our office is we've had over $1 billion in settlements with these huge pharmaceutical manufacturers that really pushed Oxycontin and a lot of these other opioids to innocent Virginians that didn't know better. They treated us like we were a chemistry test, or they were going into rural communities, particularly down in Southwest Virginia, and saying, hey, we have an amazing new wonder drug for back pain and work-related injuries, but don't worry, it's not addictive. It's called Oxycontin. Well, now we know that they knew. They knew it was incredibly addictive. They knew they were pushing it to medical providers to prescribe it to their patients. And it was like a ticking time bomb that went off, where our job is to hold them accountable as the people's protector, which is what we did. And that money doesn't go to my office. Set up the Opioid Abatement Authority. It's the largest influx of money for in-person treatment we've ever seen for localities in Virginia history. So we're going after big tech. We're going after some of the largest tech companies on the planet to protect kids from big tech and how they potentially targeted our youth. So it's been an honor to be the people's protector. Addiction rates have been dropping in Virginia. First time in over a half a decade. Our murder rate, violent crime rate has dropped because we've adopted really smart, sensible policies. And so the message back to Virginia voters is what I said before. rehire me to continue to protect you and your family in this remarkable Virginia we call home.
Well, you sold me, and I'm a Virginia voter. So
there you go. Jan, that thrills me to hear that. Thank you. One voter at a time.
My pleasure. Well, I very much appreciate your sharing all this insight into your job, into the work that you're doing, the work that you hope to continue to do going forward. One of the things that we do here on Early Returns with our guests is before we sign off, we always ask for any reading recommendations that they might have for our listeners, which are always welcomed and well received. So
okay.
In your time, do you have time to read?
Yes, I will tell you a couple books. If you are looking, I think one of the most, all right, so they put it in 3 categories. If you're looking for a book that will challenge how you look at things spiritually, Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. If you're looking at a book from the past that I think is both magnificent on a pretty remarkable Virginian, John Meacham's The Art of Power on Thomas Jefferson, I think is a magnificent book on our founding father, particularly as we enter into America's birthday in 2026, 250 years since Jefferson wrote one of the most remarkable documents about man's relationship with government. And then finally, if you want to see something on a geopolitical global stage that I think is explaining a lot of the trend lines of what we're seeing, Peter Zeihan, who is a geopolitical forecaster, used to be at Stratfor, has written a magnificent book called The Collapse of Globalization, looking at the shift that we are seeing, both globally, what impact that's going to have on the United States. And then if you want to know where the future is, George Friedman, another geopolitical forecaster, wrote a book called The Storm Before the Calm that came out a month before COVID, but he predicted the Ukraine invasion by Russia back in 2007 when he wrote another book called The Next 100 Years. George Friedman does a great job looking at the cycles of both where we are in government and in politics and economically, and predicts where we're going to be in the 2020s, 30s, and 40s and beyond. It's called The Storm Before the Calm by George Friedman. So all of those books, I think, if you're looking, you're going off to Florida for the winter, or you get looking for good books to read by the fireplace, anything by C.S. Lewis is good, but highly recommend Mere Christianity, The Art of Power by John Meacham, The Collapse of Globalization by Peter Zeihan, and The Storm Before the Calm by George Friedman. You cannot go wrong with any 4 of those books.
Well, thank you for those suggestions. I'm familiar with at least 2 of them. They all involve history, information, spirituality.
The big questions of life, right? And politics. The big questions
politics.
Of life, right?
So it's right up my alley. I think it's going to be up the alley of a lot of listeners. General Miyares, thank you for your reading suggestions and for your insights on law and politics. Thanks also to our producer, Jody Mayer-Piazza, and to the Holtzman Vogel Law Firm for its support of this program. Any opinions that are expressed on Early Returns are those of the hosts and our guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors or their clients. All of our episodes are available on Buzzsprout, as well as other streaming platforms such as Google, Apple, and Spotify. I hope you will all join us again on the next episode of Early Returns. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.
Thanks for joining Early Returns, Law and Politics with Jan Baran. We hope you will join us for future episodes, which will continue to bring you voices and insights from the people engaged in our political landscape.